Hi, everyone. So my name is Charles Krakodwe, for those who don't know me. I'm the Chief Exec for the Caribbean African Health Network. And you may be wondering what we're hoping to achieve from this session. Last year, we held the inaugural Black Health Summit. And this year, one of the challenge from our co-chairs, as well as some of our funders and our sponsors, is that by 2026 summit, we need to know what is happening and the difference the summit has made, and hence why we're having this session. So it's more about a call to action. So we're going to kick off. You may have heard or you may know some of these faces, but they're going to start telling you, a bit about themselves and give you a couple of reflections from the day. Then we can delve into what needs to change between now and 2026. So I'm going to start over the other side with David.
What do you want to know, Charles, about me?
So yes, we heard from you earlier on, but for those who are not aware, or I'm sure many of you will know, but within the voluntary sector, funding is very critical. You could have the brilliant ideas, you could have fantastic proposals. If nobody's going to fund it, then you're stuck. And the reason we're absolutely delighted to have the National Lottery Community Fund here, headed by the Chief Exec, is the fact that health is one of their 4 community-led missions. And then also the recognition that tackling structural systemic racism is really important. It's also refreshing. So, David, a couple of reflections from the day. You've heard from other speakers, but yourselves as a funder, taking health inequalities really seriously. What are some of the key takeaways?
Yeah, thank you, Charles. And I just want to say this is like a personal agenda for me and a commitment from us all at the National Lottery Community Fund. When we looked a few years ago, coming out of COVID, at what people wanted from the National Lottery going forward, where we thought National Lottery had made a difference, but what more was needed, there were some of these themes that really came through so powerfully. Health, young people, connected communities, environmental action. But fundamentally, it starts with community. It's about trusting communities, about putting resources into communities, and doing that in a way where we've got an absolute commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we use equity, actually, rather than inequality, because we think equity actually demands something deeper. It demands us actually to recognise and address the historical underserving, the systemic racist, other causes of observed inequality. Step for us as a national institution, actually, and you'll see it in our strategy. It's quite a short document, actually. It starts with community. We didn't write a long tome, several hundred pages. We wanted to keep it accessible, actually, something that people can tangibly feel. So encouraged to look at that, to listen to some of the sort of stories. I think Sandra is here, one of the game changers that we celebrated when we had the 30th anniversary of the National Lottery in the autumn, and the incredible work that she's doing with black mothers and on black maternal health, and she was speaking just downstairs now. Charles, it's been my great privilege to come here for the second year, and as I said at the start, I thought last year was, if it was starting the conversation, today we're building on that action, and we've heard from so many powerful speakers about the scale of the challenges, but also the hope that there is in the action that's being taken. And I hope when we come back again, we'll be holding ourselves to account for that. So yeah, just a few reflections from me so far.
Thanks, David. I'm going to come back about some percentages, but we'll talk about that later. So next we're going to hear from Katie Sanders from Social Finance. You may be wondering, who they are, but Social Finance is one of the co-sponsors for this summit, but then also they're taking health equity really seriously. And Katie, you've been here all day. A couple of reflections from yourselves.
Thank you. Yeah, it might surprise you, I'm passionate about using finance. Yes, finance in terms of building trust, bringing different people together, but also driving sustained change. And I guess a couple of reflections from the day. So, the theme of the day is around co-design and community leadership. I think that goes without saying when we talk about services, but we really need to go further, and we've heard some speakers throughout the day. We also need to be co-designing budgets. How are budgets set? We need to be co-designing policy. We need to be co-designing the system. Something that struck me throughout the day is the importance of language. We don't have high-risk people, we have high-risk systems, and we need to be co-designing the systems from the inside out. The other thing that I'm struck by is sustainability. We all work in health. I am determined to cure pilotitis, which I think a lot of community organisations are suffering from through no fault of their own. So we need to be thinking really creatively. Grant funding is fantastic, but then it comes to an end, then there's a cliff edge. How can we be engaging with finance teams? How can we actually be funneling grant funding in a meaningful way through the system so that it's valued and so that impact is measured? I've got lots more to say, but maybe come back to me.
Thanks, Katie. So we're going to now hear from Professor Ivan Brown. For those who may not know, he was Director of Public Health in Leicester for a long time and during the pandemic, but now has moved on to De Montfort University, but also early in the year awarded OBE for his services to public health. So, Professor, over to you, some reflections.
Thanks very much, Charles. So for me, I carry my background with me wherever I go. So I walk in here and I already knew what I wanted to say. So I was looking for specific things. The first one being community. There's some things I learned from the pandemic, and irrespective of what national leaders may tell you, community counts. And community exists. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we were doing and was reflected in our conversation is the power of community. I go so far as to say community is the only show in town if we are genuinely thinking about meaningful change in terms of inequalities. And how do we engage communities? I really get frustrated when I hear people saying, we need to hear from the black community. Or maybe it's just me, but I don't know black people who don't tell me what I need to know. So, that might be my thing. But what I've noticed is that we don't go out and hear, and we're not humble enough to listen. So one of the things I wanted to see was something around that, and I was really glad to hear that. The other thing was about localism. In order to make those changes, they have to be tailored, they have to be targeted. I always talk about Leicester, that's my home city, that's where I was born. So I'm always going to champion that, even though we're in a relegation zone at the moment. But nonetheless, I will always champion, but I recognise that my experience in Leicester is going to be different from an experience in London. And I have to make sure that whatever we do is tailored to our communities. And I've heard conversations, it's even interesting looking at the stallholders, where people were talking very much around what's happening for them. And we need to keep that narrative going. Be proud of it being local. I'm going to go to the other ones quickly, Charles. I know you're looking at me. The other one is, one of the things we learned is if it's ground up, can we make sure that the money follows? Can we make sure that if we are delivering at a local level, if we're delivering at community level, let the money and decisions around the money be taken around that level as well. So that was one of the key things. And I'm a public health person. I'm always going to talk about data. But data only counts if we're included in it. And listening to some of the things about the observatory, etc., we've got to really push around making sure we are included in data, or else, let me tell you, we will just be ignored. Yeah. So we've got to be very serious about that, and we have to have singularity of purpose. And that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that we want to make things better. Let's get around that totem. Okay.
Thanks, Prof. So now, Rosie, I know some of you get a bit anxious when we mention pharmaceuticals, but it's always good we can use, money from, to do good things. And, we're delighted to have yourselves as one of our sponsors, but, it's good to see a global pharmaceutical taking health inequalities seriously. I heard you speak at the Royal Society of Medicine in January, and through conversations you co-sponsored today as well. A couple of reflections and thoughts from yourself.
Thanks, Charles. And yeah, a few of you may be wondering why AstraZeneca's on the stage, and it is that it's our global commitment around improving health equity. I just want to start off with actually a bit of an anecdote before I move on to reflections, which is about a year ago, I was in the audience for a panel like this, and so one of my peers in industry put their hand up and says, well, what can industry do about that? And the panelist's response has stuck with me, and it's really fed into the way that I communicate internally what we should be doing around health equity, which was, historically, you have been part of the problem. And there were a lot of raised eyebrows, but also a lot of nods in the room when the panelists said that. But then they said, looking forward, you have to be part of the solution, which was why when I was invited to join this panel, rather than shying away from the conversation and what could be quite an intimidating thing to do, I thought it was the right thing to put ourselves out there and join that conversation. And I think that brings me back to my first reflection, which is going back to the point Sedi made right at the beginning of the day: do not observe. I'm not here to tell people we've got it right at AstraZeneca, we know exactly what we're doing, we're funding all these amazing initiatives and whatever. I'm here to listen and learn, but critically I'm also here to engage and take these messages that I've learned today back to my organisation. I think the second reflection picks on a point that, Katie, you touched on as well. It's around sustainable partnerships. This is a really big thing that I champion internally. I think it's amazing that we can provide grant programs, and that's a really great short-term thing we can do, but increasingly we really need to be making sure it's more than just grant funding. We're partners to communities, to systems, to individuals, so that we can make the case for embedding the changes that we bring in. Because too often we do hear about amazing initiatives that are brought in, and they say, wow, it worked, and look, you increased uptake of breast cancer screening, and then the next following year, NHS isn't going to fund it. We have to then try and make the case internally to fund it. We need to find ways to work together to make everyone say yes and say, actually, these are initiatives, pilots that must be embedded into communities. And I think that goes back to maybe my third and final point before I hand back, which is we recognise our responsibility as a company, and it goes beyond grant funding. It goes back to our reason as a business, which is driving innovation and medicines equity, that we leave no patient behind. So whilst there are short-term partnerships and grant funding programs that we can do, the more important aspect is that we are embedding a health equity mindset into our business, that we're establishing long-term relationships. And I'm really pleased that this is our first year supporting this platform, but I'm really excited about where our relationship with Calm will go and the opportunities we can provide together. So I'll leave it at that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rosie. Just to say that we're expecting Esther Mukaka, who is the NIHR lead for, diversity, but she's having tonsillitis, so unfortunately she couldn't be here. And also just after 4 o'clock, I had a final apology from the Secretary of State's office. He really wanted to be here, but many of you know budgets. So anyway, the other thing to say before we hear the final bits is you can join in the conversations about what needs to change. Yes, I'm gauging the temperature, that's all right. You can join in the conversations about what needs to change, but we're really serious. And the topics we selected for the workshops are all really important. Within that are 2 of the manifesto commitments for this current government that we want to make sure, from the workshop notes, as well as opportunities for people to join task and finish groups, to really determine what needs to change. So please, if you did not register, make sure you register, because we're going to put a call out for people to join task and finish groups. I heard from the lotteries workshop, the people wanted more time. So we're going to have a health and tackling racism task and finish group, diversity in digital and AI. I know some questions were thrown to, those in the AI, workshop. But then Black maternal and neonatal, health, what needs to change? What is our clear ask of government, and you heard from Paulette earlier in the morning, but also black mental health, considering the current Mental Health Act will be revised, reviewed, whatever you call that. As a community, what needs to change? And that is why we need your voice on the task and finish group. And then the long-term conditions and CVD, but also the 10-year health plan. We may have a few weeks more to feed into that, so it would be great to hear from yourselves. For some may not know, there's the stakeholder sort of partner council that meets on a monthly basis, but also climate, race, and health inequalities. Indoor pollution. Some of you will remember the 2-year-old from our community, but also someone who died from asthma from our community. So what needs to change? We need to be part of. And then the final one is genomics. It's really, really important. Like Seti said, we are not observers, but part of it. So we have just under 2 minutes. I'm going to go round. By next year, 2026 summit, what do you want to see change, whether in policy, in practice? David, I know you can be bold, ambitious. In terms of funding, do you have any quotas, or, through the task and finish group, we might work with you in terms of, what people need to see, because data really matter. So I'm going to start with you, Rosie. What would you like to see change?
I think we had a really interesting, important session around AI. It's moving at pace. I'd love to see some really tangible work streams on how do you ensure it's inclusive, and how can you bring industry along with it. I know it's something that globally, as well as in the UK, AstraZeneca is very passionate and keen on. So we have to be part of that conversation too. So I'm excited about that.
What I'd like to see is us really tackling the inverse care law. Those that have the greatest need get the least health. We need to switch that, and I want to see what we're doing to try and just nibble away at reducing that.
I would like to see a real shift in what I view as a kind of improportionate burden of proof. So we spend a lot of money, time and effort on things that we know are not working. We've got great ideas and things that are working, and I think that we ask way too much in terms of evidence, and we just need to make that shift. And if I may, it's really my mantra is progress and not perfection, and I feel like we sometimes ask the world of things that are new and innovative, but actually it's common sense and it's good care.
I so agree with all of those points. I think the AI one, the pace of that is moving so quickly. I'm not even sure a year is. We're going to have to get on this faster. There's some really important conversations that need to happen now about what AI really means for us, how that is not going to further exacerbate biases and inequality, how that changes the nature of community, and what does that mean for public services and institutions and charities. That's big, it's happening fast. I guess my thing would be really act local, start now, and there's an emergent agenda here. Last year, it was just before the election, wasn't it? So we're hearing big changes. We're on a journey in the National Lottery Community Fund. I hope in a year's time we'll be having a deeper conversation again about these big questions: data, finance, governance, and that we're learning, we're adapting, and holding ourselves to account for that in the transparent way that we should.
Well, massive thanks to all the panelists. And then I suppose from me, the final thing is we know things are moving really fast, NHS England going, ICBs and all that. But for those who may not know, London Inspire program, for what we do has been co-funded by the 5 ICBs across London as to what will happen post-match. So probably next week, we don't know yet. So I know there are some funders in the room. It will be good to keep Inspire on the show so that we can continue to do what we do right across the 32 boroughs of London and beyond. So if you are able to support, come and speak to me and I'll put you in touch with our co-chairs. Massive thanks to you all for your time. Thank you, panelists.